Okay, here we go. Okay, hi, and welcome back to the Tree of Life, and welcome for joining us in our second episode. And my name is Saifon, Singtong, and I am your host. Before we start, I wanted to explain to you about our beautiful guest speakers and the ones that we introduce onto this show. Some are professionals that are qualified to give advice, and some are speakers that are not qualified to give advice, but they are sharing it from their personal experience through their traumas. And so whatever tool or techniques that you want to use and take from this chat, please do. So let's get started. I would like to introduce to you Caroline Michael, who runs her clinic practice from, I forgot where.
From Isha at home.
Yeah. Isha. Where's Isha for those who...
In Surrey, just outside of London.
Just outside of London. So Caroline is a qualified hypnotherapist and psychotherapist and a beautiful mother. And Yossef, give away, mister. Yossef Sagi is a qualified and certified coach, an energy leadership practitioner, and a spiritualist. And I've known you guys for years, so I'm absolutely honoured to have you here and sharing your experience and professionalism. So the topic today we're going to be discussing is anxiety and depression. It's a massive topic, and I think for me personally, I admit I did suffer from, I did and still suffer from anxiety, because I know I get nervous about a lot of things, and I know I used to suffer from depression to the point where it gets extreme. I think my depression got me to the point where I became suicidal. So that's how, to the point, I know what depression really feels like. And from because I invited these two beautiful people onto this show because they have experiences from different viewpoints. One is a spiritualist and the other one is a professional, but both still professional because you're both coaches, motivators. Yeah, just lovely people. Okay, so first topic today for discussion is, what is your view on sorry, I've lost it because I just got like, oh yay. Okay, so
do like a take two and you can just first topic for discussion.
That was great. I was thinking, wow, she's perfect. This is seriously slick.
It's like, yeah. Okay, so
she's lost it.
I totally lost it. Right.
You're going to give me the giggles. I'm going to get nervous.
It kind of like makes you really nervous. All right, okay, it's okay. It's all right. We'll cut. Do I get to cut these? Oh,
yeah. If you have a recording, you can always edit it later.
Yeah.
So what you can do is you can do like just a cut and be like, first topic of a discussion.
Okay. Well, I'll make it extreme. Okay. So the first topic of discussion about anxiety and depression is the levels of anxiety and depression. And some people don't understand that there are different types of levels of anxiety and of depression. And it'd be nice to kind of hear your point of view in how you notice that. So let's take it with you, Caroline. Are you there?
Okay, so I thought I'd start with just explaining a little bit about the difference between anxiety and depression. So depression is one singular illness, and anxiety is a sort of umbrella term which covers a lot of different conditions. So the most common anxiety condition in the UK at the minute is GAD, which is generalized anxiety disorder. And then you also have things such as phobias, social anxiety, there is OCD, was classed as an anxiety disorder until a few years ago, and it's now been sort of given its own category, but it is very much has very strong similarities with the generalized anxiety disorder. Depression is characterized with low mood, low self-esteem, lack of interest in general, like things that you used to enjoy, life in general, low motivation, feeling very fatigued. You also have another issue which can come from anxiety and depression, which is chronic fatigue syndrome. So, and these two things, anxiety and depression, can exist on their own, but they can also coexist. So people can suffer from both anxiety and depression, or they can suffer from just anxiety or just depression. Or for a lot of people who do suffer with mental health issues, you can sort of slide between the two. It's not a static condition or kind of experience. And if things are left untreated, then they can get worse and become more severe, and people can end up having suicidal thoughts, and that can come from both anxiety issues or depression issues as well. So it's very much on a sort of sliding scale, really, and there are different levels, as you rightly said, Saifon, and it's kind of about noticing before it gets too far down the line, noticing that there's an issue and stepping in with a treatment, whether that's a talking psychotherapy treatment or hypnotherapy or medication, or sometimes both. You know, different people respond to different things, and I think sometimes medication isn't the right answer, and sometimes it is prescribed to someone when maybe other therapies could work but aren't tried. But obviously that's case by case basis. But I think there are some people that do genuinely need medication, and for them it is life-saving. So yeah, that's kind of my initial thoughts on it. I don't know what I have personal experience with both anxiety and depression, which started from when, looking back now, from when I was much younger, when I was in my early teens. Never really got kind of picked up on, or I never really sort of recognized it until I got much older, and it became quite severe. Similar with you, Saifon, it did become a real issue, but I still never went down the medication route. So I decided to sort of focus on creating good habits, and I studied the hypnotherapy, which really helped, and I'd had hypnotherapy in the past and I found it really, really helpful. I stopped drinking alcohol, I started exercising, meditating, fostering loads of really sort of beneficial and positive habits, and that's really, really helped, essentially. Diet as well is really important. So, yeah.
So what habits did you kind of implement into your routine to be able to get yourself out of it?
Yeah, it's a good one. It's really difficult when you are in a depression or you are suffering with a mental health issue. It can be really hard to actually take those first steps and starting the positive habits, because you just don't feel like you've got it in you to do anything. Like, I remember sort of saying to myself, I can't, or people would say to me, oh, you just do a bit of exercise at home on your own. And I'd just say, oh, I just can't, I haven't got the time. I couldn't find the time. I couldn't find the energy to give myself that bit of time or self-love, if you like. So I think it's a slow process. I think the first thing that I did incorporate was exercise. And I think that really did lift my mood, and I really noticed the difference with that, with the regular sort of commitment to that. But the main thing was giving up alcohol as well. That really made a big difference. And then from there, I was then able to have the space and the sort of, I was able to engage with the more positive other habits such as meditation, and I was able to notice the difference that it made energetically and things like that. So I really kind of connected with it, but it was a very gradual process over a couple of years. It took a while.
Like, I think alcohol kind of like suppresses your emotional well-being quite a lot. So yeah, I haven't drunk for quite a while. So it's actually quite a nice feeling when you're not drinking and you can actually kind of engage with your emotions a lot more.
Yeah.
But as a coach, Yossef, how can you identify like the levels of anxiety when you deal with your clients?
Yeah. To me, the way that I see depression or anxiety or any state that someone is in, it's always to take a look at what is at the root or at the core of why they're experiencing that state. So the depression or anxiety are mechanisms that we use psychologically to cope with our circumstances and to cope, or sometimes it feels like a lack of coping or lack of ability of coping with their circumstances. And that always begins with a thought. And actually that thought always begins with a certain perception or an attitude that we have to the world around us. So we look at the world, and the world is just a bunch of things happening. It's very objective. But then based on our upbringing and education and the media and what our parents and our teachers told us, we have a certain worldview in our previous experience. We have a certain worldview that we develop, and we take a look at the world and we have a relationship with it. And based on how we interpret that relationship, we're going to cope differently. So if our relationship with the world is that it's very overwhelming and there's nothing I can do about it, then it's going to cause this laundry list of possibilities that Caroline was outlining for us, which to me, I felt it was like a checklist. It was like, oh, I had OCD, had lots of depression, had suicidal one attempt, several ideations on a regular basis. Then I repressed it. It became anxiety, because anxiety is like a little bit more energetic and it feels like a little bit more functional than depression. Depression's I have no choice. Anxiety is just all the choices scare the hell out of me, right? And as professionals and as people, we've all have a lot of introspection in the way that work that we do, and also a lot of training. You develop a lot of coping mechanisms to work through all this stuff, but it doesn't necessarily make it go away, because the coping mechanisms, we're coping with the effect, we're coping with the syndrome, we're coping with with our with the basically how we're reacting to the situation. The depression, anxiety is a reaction to our mindset. And what I believe is to truly go to the core of the problem, it's to go to the mindset of what's behind it. What is the belief system that is causing all of this to put in motion? So meditation is very useful, and I meditate. Putting your body into motion is very useful. But sometimes when you're at a point of depression and when it's at your lowest point, you've become completely lethargic and apathetic, which means you have zero energy to do anything. Yeah. I remember at my lowest point, you can't leave the bed. You can't convince yourself to do that. So it's like, what do you do then? Like, it's easy to say, oh, you should meditate. You don't feel you're capable, but oh, reach out to someone. You don't feel you can sometimes at those points. So it's when we're not at the lowest points, sometimes it's taking a proactive step into looking at those belief systems and those thoughts that permeate everything, so that we can actually take a look at the core issue of what's going on there. And that's sort of the work that I do, is more around the belief systems, because I don't diagnose and I don't treat therapeutically these particular symptoms.
Yeah, I really resonate with a lot of that, what you're saying. It's definitely about finding what's underneath, what's underlying, causing these sort of constant feelings. Say if it was generalized anxiety or if it was depression. Essentially, anxiety is your sympathetic nervous system is in constant arousal. Fight or flight is engaged, and you're literally in fear, constant fear. So you're not, your digestion is slower. You're not got blood to, there's more blood going to your legs, and you're like ready to run or fight. So it can really affect how much nutrients you absorb if you're constantly in this state of arousal. So it's finding out what is the thoughts behind, why is this constantly being triggered? Why do I feel unsafe all the time? And I think usually there's lots of reasons why, say, someone could experience a panic attack. It could be just a one-off, very severe event that they've experienced, like a death of a loved one, or you know, a loss of a job or a big life change can trigger it. But often that person will have a sort of predisposition almost to having that response because they haven't had a secure base, like their childhood. It will potentially go back to their attachment to their primary caregivers when they were smaller. Did they feel the world as a safe place? As you said, how do we see the world? How do we perceive the world? Is it a safe place or is it not a safe place? And am I safe? Am I okay? Are you okay? Yes, that's a good position. As the other positions are, I'm not okay, you're not okay, which is someone's in a lot of trouble when they have that kind of position, that viewpoint. And the other one is, I'm okay, you're not okay, which is kind of verging on the sociopath type end of the spectrum. So yeah, we view everything through our set of filters that we've been programmed with through our upbringing. And these things can be changed and rewired, but you have to delve deep, and it can be really intense sometimes. You don't really necessarily know what you're going to find, and it might not be a big trauma, big T trauma, such as abuse or sexual abuse or anything like that. It can be a sort of an emotional abuse level, but on the outside everything seems perfect, but there was no connection there with the mother and the father. There was no sort of love and support within the family, things like that. So there's a lot of different levels underneath what causes it, as well as the levels of the symptoms. So it's interesting, but it's really, it's you have to go deep to kind of change it often.
As you're speaking about it now, and I'm sort of taking a look at myself, and when I look at my childhood, it's like no abuse, not physical, emotional, sexual, nothing like that I can think of or remember. Parents got divorced, but that's very common, and nothing that seems out of the ordinary. But as you're talking about, if I can sort of dilute for myself what was my core thought that comes up a lot also around anxiety and also around the depression, because I've had periods of both. It's almost always this belief that I have to take care of myself and I have to take care of everyone else around me. So it's not from a place of thinking that the world is a scary place or anything like that. It was always from a place of maybe taking on too much for myself and carrying a lot on my shoulders. So I remember when I was young, I always felt I needed to take care of my mother emotionally. Like, my mother was a great mom in a lot of ways, but she suffered from her own depression. And I was sort of a very empathetic type child. I think people who have high levels of empathy are also more prone to depression and anxiety. So I was very empathetic, taking on a lot of other people's emotions and how they were, and managing my own at the same time. And so at my worst, that would look like depression. And at my best, maybe anxiety, or maybe I read some work a few years ago by someone called Dr. Margaret Rutherford, I believe. And she wrote about something called perfectly hidden depression, which is, you see in a lot of people, you don't see it, that's the thing, it's hidden. But it tends to show up for people who are very high functioning and tend to have a lot of responsibility in their life. And so the depressive symptoms become repressed, and some of the thoughts are the same. The fact that they don't go to anyone for help and all of that, but they just appear as very high functioning, capable people, but then they might have a nervous breakdown, or they might go into a depressive state when there's no one else around. No one will know about it. And I can see that for myself. It was, again, that same thought. It's like, okay, I can take care of myself, or I need to take care of myself. No one can really take care of me. And I'm responsible for my family and my work and everything else. And so I believe that the cause of it can look very different for different people. I don't know if you recognize for yourselves, or if you'd like to share it, like what do you find is like the root thought or belief behind your experience?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's very much being a parentified child, that's what that's called. I don't know if you've heard that term, whereas you are the parent essentially within, as a child, that role is put on you to take care of parent, sibling, whatever it is, due to because they can't look after you because of their own emotional issues. For me, it wasn't so much that, it was more my my environment growing up. It was the sort of secure family unit, but there was a lot of kind of anxiety within my parents as well. Like they both sort of suffered with different forms of anxiety, which was never kind of acknowledged as an issue, if you see what I mean. So on the surface, everything was absolutely fine, but there was a lot of control in the household due to, you know, the anxiety producing a need for control. So yeah, it kind of felt like I was very much brought up in an authoritarian way, where I had to just do as I was told and not question. I wasn't didn't feel like I had a voice. And then when I then sort of left home, I kind of felt I was left with not being able to make logical, rational decisions for myself, because I'd never really learned how to, because I'd just always done what I was told and kind of followed orders almost. And also I think I had a potential predisposition due to, there's also, you know, serotonin imbalances which occur, especially with sort of when you're transitioning into a teenager and your hormones are all over the place and things like that. So yeah, I didn't have any big traumas, the same as you, but in a way, I think if you're one of those people that has had more of that kind of thing, like an emotional thing that's not quite so obvious, but it's sort of more drawn out rather than one big event that's caused a specific trauma, it's harder because you kind of think, well, everything was fine and I had a great childhood, so why am I struggling? Why am I suffering? Because I haven't got a reason, like I've got no reason to potentially feel, you know, I don't understand why this is happening because there's nothing to kind of obviously pin it on. So I think, and as things have kind of progressed over the last kind of 10 years or so, there's a lot of work been done into the fact that it doesn't necessarily need to be a big trauma to actually have a lasting effect. It's just about being seen and heard and being able to explore that and process it in a positive way. And if you can do that, then you can avoid having a nervous breakdown when you're 40. You know, if you can kind of speak to someone about it in your early 20s and figure it all out, then that's really beneficial. But I think there was still a lot of stigma around mental health when I was in my early 20s, whereas now that's changed a lot, which is amazing. And I think it's not got the stigma that it used to have at all. And I think that's so positive, and that everyone's so much more willing to talk about their mental health, because everyone has mental health. It's not like, oh, this person, I'm fine, I don't have mental health, they've got a mental health issue but I'm fine. That's not how it works. It's like physical health. So mental health, like physical health, you have to work, you have to look after it, you have to kind of exercise it, and you have to feed it with meditation. And I saw there was these sort of studies that have been done, I can't quote the exact reference from it, but I heard Ruby Wax talking about it. I don't know if you've seen her, any of her books she's written about meditation. And she's very much a scientist from a scientific point of view rather than the spiritual point of view. But she had a qualification from Oxford, I think it's a master's in meditation and the effects that it has on the brain. And they've shown that through meditation you can actually change the size and shape of your amygdala. So your amygdala is the part of your brain that's responsible for the fight and flight and the anxiety. So it's amazing. It really does work, and there is physical sort of proof of how it works. And I just think we're starting to see that kind of scientific viewpoint on the more spiritual practices, as in meditation, yoga, things like that. They're starting to be recognized as having the physical benefits that people who practice them know that are there, but in the past were kind of seen as not being a kind of scientific way of doing things. And I think it's really great.
Like, it's absolutely, do you know what? It was so nice to listen to you both share your stories, because my story was like, And when I viewed anxiety and different people having anxiety, I thought that, oh, you know, perfect families, they don't get anxiety. Why they got anxiety for? And I was like, yeah, but my anxiety was like, it came from a broken family. And like when I was so like a couple of months ago, my mum popped me this news and she goes, oh, you do realise that you were in hospital when you were a baby, right? And I'm like, right, why, what for? She goes, because your dad, but the stepmom had beaten me up so badly that she hospitalised you. And then the anxiety came on like a couple of months later, and it didn't really click in because I was just trying to ignore it. And like, you know, when you don't, you refuse, your automatic reaction is just to refuse that connection with that emotion, just to feel a little bit stronger. And then all of a sudden it clicks in and you're kind of like, oh my God, did that just happen? And you just realize that you're actually then going through this traumatic event, even though it was years and years ago. And it just takes you into the place where you didn't really want to connect to. And it's so hard when you're kind of trying to connect with that emotion and you just don't want to. So, you know, it's like, it's okay for you to have a trauma, no matter the experience. The trauma is kind of for that individual, whether it's like riding on a bike and falling over, but that's your traumatic event and that's how you felt about it. You know, someone would be looking on the other side going, yeah, you just fell off a bike. But the actual experience was that fall and that impact that really hurt that someone. You know what I mean? Yeah, so connecting with that emotion through meditation and stuff like that, it's trying to get you into it. I think that's the hardest part, I suppose. Like, you want to be able to what would you advise for the first kind of step? If someone went through a traumatic event, would there be a first step that you would kind of ask them to do, and just to try and get them past that little bit? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think it, again, as you said, it just depends on what the trauma is, but also how that person sees the trauma as well. It's the same thing. I don't know if you've heard the expression that it's not the sort of event that's the issue, it's your reaction to the event that's the issue. So I guess it just totally depends where that person is in it. And I'm assuming if they're coming for help, they've not been able to necessarily process what's happened and they're suffering with sort of anxiety or flashbacks or whatever it is relating to, say, falling off having a bike accident, say, or a motorbike accident, say. I think it would involve a lot of I would start with a lot of stabilization work, just to make sure that that person was sort of secure enough now to be able to kind of go back and reprocess or reframe the experience. So again, depending what the actual trauma was, would depend on what the sort of work that I'd do. I'm not qualified in EMDR as yet, but it is something that I'd like to do, which is the eye movement desensitization, which can be really good for helping people process traumatic experiences, but it does involve them reliving the event, which in itself can be really hard. And you have to make sure that that person is in a position to be able to do that safely, you know, and without kind of becoming too distressed by it. So it's about helping that person to move through the traumatic event, because often they'll get stuck just before it's sort of, say the trauma is T and there's T -1 and then there's T +1. So you want to try and move the person through the event to the other side, where they know it's in the past, they know it's over, it's done with, and that they can move on. Whereas people they might know cognitively that it's in the past, but their body, their sort of, you store things within your cells, within your body, you store emotions and you store trauma within your physical and your sort of energy bodies. So it's about being able to move the whole person through that as a whole. because certain parts can get really stuck. So, and that can keep triggering this fight or flight response, because part of you feels like there's still a danger, or there's still a trauma is still occurring even now. So it is quite complex, and I think it really just very depends on exactly what the circumstances were. But some people who are very resilient would be able to kind of have the experience and process it and frame it, and it wouldn't necessarily leave them with lasting psychological damage. Other people who aren't so resilient would really struggle. So again, it was so different. And one thing, as you said, might be no problem for one person, but then someone else is going to really struggle with it. So, and that's due to a huge different amount of factors to do with both nature and nurture. And I think they're discovering that actually environment has a really big impact on nature now, so that genes can be switched on and off through environmental factors and things like that. So they're discovering new things all the time, but I think there's a lot involved in it, and that's what I find so fascinating, to be honest, about it, because I think there's no two cases are the same. So
that's it. It's absolutely amazing. Like, but how about, what if an individual, let's say for you, like this example is for you, Yossef, like, because you're a coach and you get so many people that suffer from anxiety to be able to move forward within their path, and they have all these, want to have all these dreams and aspirations, and the only person that's kind of pulling them back is them. What would you be able to do as a coach to be able to kind of like make them move past that anxiety?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's completely natural. It's completely natural that we're going to hold ourselves back, and that we're the only people who do. Before I get into a particular technique around it, I think it's important to understand that anything that we consider holding us back, or where we're keeping ourselves behind, or we're stubbornly holding on to something, that communication to ourselves around a part of ourselves holding us back is detrimental to us. I think the first step is to understand that any of these mechanisms that we have, including anxiety, including depression, including fear, are all there to help us. It's all there to help us. I think the first shift in the way that to see things is that there's nothing wrong with us. There's nothing to treat. There's nothing to cure. We're not broken. These are actually all physiological, psychological reactions that happen in the body that are built as defense mechanisms. So think about it this way. If you've had an experience in the past that traumatized you or embarrassed you or hurt you, your body's going to put up defenses to protect you from feeling that way again. So I think the first thing is to recognize and to integrate the idea that my depression is here to help me. My anxiety is here to help me, and not to exclude it. Anytime that we exclude it, you can think about it this way. The part of you that was traumatized is likely your child self. It happened during your childhood. So if you're giving yourself the message that your anxiety is bad and needs to be removed and taken care of, or your depression is bad and needs to be removed or taken care of, or whatever else your coping mechanisms are that they're bad, it's like you're telling a child, you've been bad. Stop acting up, right? Child gets something stolen from them, a toy stolen from them, and you tell them, stop crying, grow up. How effective is that? But that's the message that we're giving ourselves. When we have depression, and I say there's something wrong with me, would you tell a child there's something wrong with you? No. So I think the first thing is, what's that?
Sometimes it's an automatic response as a parent. Like when you're in, like, some people put themselves, rather than taking themselves out of the situation and stepping back, they become a child themselves, and
that's right,
against the child.
And the parent acts out of their own trauma and out of their own reactive system. So yes, go to a professional who can help you with these things, but also understand, I think one of the first things is that you get to parent yourself. Because you have that adult part of yourself that has insight, and there's still the child part of yourself, which is the one that's acting up. And you know what? Maybe change the perspective. I'm not acting up, I'm hurt. So the first thing is to acknowledge and validate the experience that you're having, and to understand that there's something there. And this sort of came to me as an insight. You know, I have loads of coping mechanisms because I use them. Meditation. So I went through a pretty serious depressive experience about 1.5 years ago, one of the worst that I had in a long time, because I had a lot as a kid. Then I thought I was over it, but I actually had repressed it. Hadn't had depression for so many years. And then it came back with a vengeance about 1.5 years ago. I was in the worst state, one of the worst states of my life. And right away, I'm like, okay, use the tools, you know, meditate, use this focus tool, ask yourself questions, do this inner child work, all those different things. Really what I was telling myself was there's something wrong with me. There's something wrong with this experience, and I need to remove it. Now, no matter what I did, it didn't solve the problem. Why? Because I was looking at it as a problem. So I did the only thing I could do after a certain point, which is nothing, but an active nothing, which was surrender. So I surrendered into the experience, and I just said, okay, I can't do anything at this point anymore. I surrender. And I fell into the deepest part of it, and I just let myself be at what I called my worst, or at my lowest level of consciousness that I could be. Complete victim, complete at the effect of everything around me, nothing I can do about it. And there was a moment, I wrote a blog about this, and I can give you the link later. I call it falling back into conscious awareness. And it's like I fell back from the lowest point. And we usually look at the lowest to the highest like a ladder. Like I'm at my lowest level and I'm at my highest level like a ladder. And suddenly I saw it as a loop. When I fell back from the lowest, I had this amazing awareness that I became not just a person who's experiencing what I'm experiencing, but at the same time, the observer of my experience. I could see myself from the outside. Like what most people say enlightenment feels like. I could see myself from the outside, and I started laughing. I went from the lowest point to just like this hilarious, I thought the whole thing was hilarious all of a sudden. The whole thing became the funniest thing in the world. And then from there, myself, the person in the experience was like, why are you laughing? And myself that was observing the experience was like, this is really funny. And then they started having a dialogue, and my higher self was coaching my experience self. It just started asking me questions. It's like, okay, you think you're depressed. Okay, tell me more about that. What are you feeling in your body? Well, I don't feel a lot of energy, and I'm low and I can't really move very much, and all of that. Is like, okay, because you have no energy and you don't feel like you want to move, does that mean that you're depressed? Does that, and I'm like, well, I guess not. And what feelings do you have? And I labeled them. And what thoughts do you have? And I started saying what my thoughts were. Because you have those thoughts, does that mean you are depressed? And it was just challenging, like all these beliefs. And what I realized that the depression for me, at least, I can only speak to my own experience, was an identification with something that I've been taught, that when I have these feelings and these thoughts and this in my body, I call that depression. And then I have an identification with being depressed. And then I act as if I am. And having that awareness didn't like snap me right out of it, but it just gave me a reference point. And then I asked, so my lower self asked, so well, then why do I have these thoughts and why do I have these feelings? And it was basically the message that came to me around it was a full stop. I was doing a bunch of things in my life. I was going in a certain direction that wasn't right for me, caused me a lot of anxiety because I'd like overthink it and I would try and force myself to go through things, and I wasn't listening to the anxiety. So what happens? Depression comes. It puts a full stop, puts brakes on everything. Stop the car. You're going the wrong way. And what I realized that depression came to do was to be like, you're speeding towards the edge of a cliff. If I stop you right now, I'm going to protect you from flying off the cliff, give you some time to take a look at what you really want to do right now, and then you get to drive in whatever direction you want to go. It was like a full stop to just take a look at what was going on. And now, when I notice those feelings come up, because it didn't cure my depression, because guess what? Depression doesn't need to be cured. It's an important part. If it exists, it's valid, and there's a reason for it. But what I can do now is I can see when those symptoms start coming up and be like, oh, the full stop is coming. All right, let's see. I don't need, right now I'm not that close to the cliff. I can sort of slow down and let's see which turn do I need to make in my life right now. So I don't necessarily need the full stop if I have the awareness of what it's come to tell me. And everything, anxiety is coming to tell me something, my anger is coming to tell me something. So instead of removing all of these things that we think are bad about ourselves, is to be questioning and curious about what has this come to tell me. And that changed my relationship to it, from something that needs to be removed to something I can learn from.
I can totally relate to that. It's like when you tell your brain that you have something wrong, even if it's mentally or physically, and if you tell yourself that you're a bad person or you're not good at that, then you will automatically do it. Like if you're in pain, I'm in pain, and then your body will go fatigued and feel painful, and so it's about positive thinking, and how you kind of do it. So yeah, you were going to say something, Caroline?
No, I was just going to say that's amazing that you were able to do that. I think you obviously, as you said, are a very empathetic person and had quite a high sort of self-knowledge, and you kind of know about a lot of things, spirituality and the higher self and things like that. And I think that's a very strong mental kind of, I've only just met you like tonight, but I can see how strong you are, and I think that's really inspiring. And I think in a similar way, I had a similar kind of experience, but it wasn't quite so it wasn't a one sort of turning point. Almost, it was kind of, it's been more of a drawn out thing, in that I've kind of not sought help elsewhere. I've kind of managed to work through it all by myself, and it's not necessarily better or worse. I'd say potentially for me it made it a longer process, I don't know, or maybe it's been a more transformative process. It's been deeper because I have done it by myself, but I think for a lot of people that's maybe not within their scope of realm of a possibility, just because of their all the reasons we talked about before, their upbringing, their perception of the world, how they see things. That wouldn't be a potential possibility for them to be able to pull themselves out of it like that, because it's when you are at that really low point, it's it can be really hard to get out of it. So I think that's amazing.
Totally agreed. It's all about the level of awareness, and I think that's why, if we're working with people, one of the biggest gifts that we can give them is awareness. And the awareness begins with, what are my current belief systems and thoughts and feelings about this situation, and which belief systems, thoughts, and feelings would benefit me most in this situation, and to create that shift. So to create the shift from who I think I am, what's the story I'm telling myself, what's this identity I've taken on, to who do I want to be, and what's the identity I need to take on, and the belief systems I need to take on to be that person. And once you have a new identity and a belief system, the thoughts, the emotions, the actions just filter out from there. If you're just trying to change someone's behavior, it might be a band-aid solution. But the core work is always around the identity and the belief system of who the person thinks they are. So if you're going to, and it's important, I want to be clear, it's important to use the word depression because we want to diagnose for people and be clear about it. But we don't want to use it as a label or as a box. So to say, I am a depressed person, is very disempowering for a person. So it's to make sure that we use it only for diagnosis and not for labeling people.
A lot of people like to be labeled, or want to be labeled, because they want self-pity and they feel vulnerable. But the best kind of way to deal with a lot of anxiety and depression is just to kind of reflect. being able to reflect by yourself and question your emotions and understand that emotion and just know where that emotion came from. And I think a lot of people find it really, really difficult just to be by themselves. Like, I've had a conversation with a few people. It's like, oh, I just can't be by myself. And I used to think like that all the time, and sitting with my emotions really heartbreaking. And that step to be able to go, right, okay, take a deep breath. I know where I want to be. I know where I want to go. How am I going to get myself there? And having just, I think the step of having a goal to do something, just the one thing, can take you out of that anxiety mode. Like, I still sometimes get, I get anxious over phone calls when there's an anonymous phone call. And it just,
no one likes those.
drives me mad. It's like, I don't want to pick up, and it just makes me anxious. Even like, you get the letter and it's a bill and you're like, oh really, another bill? So that kind of anxiety, but your brain tells you that. Your brain tells you the worst case scenario when it's not really the worst case scenario. And did you ever read that book on the monkey brain?
The Chimp Paradox.
Chimp Paradox.
Yeah.
Amazing book. I think I took a lot of knowledge and tools out of that book.
It just explains things in a really clear way of understanding, doesn't it, about the ego, and about how you react, and you're triggered to react from different ego states. And and he uses the analogy of a computer and like hardware and software, so you're programmed by your childhood experiences and things like that. But the way he explains it is really good. I actually recommended it to someone today, to a client. It's really good.
Read it again. Okay, so would you advise anybody on any advice or therapies that they could be able to manage through their anxieties, or therapies that they could even look at?
I mean, personally, from my experience, I feel that hypnotherapy, hypnopsychotherapy was the most kind of transformative for me. I had a couple of sessions when I was younger of kind of just more normal counseling, talking therapy, but I don't think I connected with the therapist. I felt like I can talk to my friends, and I did talk a lot to my friends. And I felt like I needed something that was going to go a bit deeper than just talking. So there was a lot of barriers. We build up a lot of conscious kind of barriers, and it can be hard to break through those. It can take a long time. Like CBT has proven to be effective, but it is a long-term process, like at least a year, if not longer, for pretty much everyone. So with the hypnosis, it just kind of expedites the process a little bit, and it helps you to reconnect with your kind of inner self, and you're also within reconnecting the mind-body system as well. It just really turns your attention inwards. And I found that to just be really effective, and I would recommend anyone to go and see a qualified hypnopsychotherapist. I think it's an unregulated industry, so I do think you need to be careful, and I think you need to check who you're going to see has a good qualification from and is affiliated to one of the bodies, either UKCP or BACP. And I think if you go through those directories, then you will get someone who knows what they're doing and is qualified. But I think hypnotherapy and hypnopsychotherapy especially is I would definitely recommend it. It really works.
Yossef?
For me, I'm more just talk about like self-regulation techniques, even though I said that those are usually they're not dealing with things from the core, but breath work, connecting back to the breath can be very powerful, just like meditation. Both of those techniques, whether meditation, for some people meditation is hard, so just focus on the breath. Take deep inhales and deep exhales. By focusing on the breath, you're doing basically what Caroline said, you're awakening the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex actually quiets down the fight or flight response in amygdala. So by awakening those parts of the brain, you're quieting down the fight or flight. It's really great with dealing with anxiety in the moment. It's just by focusing on the breath.
Yeah.
Because what happens is that you can sort of think about it as when you are at lower states of consciousness, depression being the lowest and anxiety just above it, it's you have tunnel vision. You can only see. So in depression, you have no options, and in anxiety, you have very few, and they all look scary, right? So by focusing on breath, meditation, even some types of like conscious movement like Qigong or anything like that, anything that's very conscious and present, it slows all of that down. It increases your field of vision, and you're able to see more options. So anything like that is very simple. And the other thing, which sort of I alluded to earlier, which we can do for ourselves or for others, is without trying to solve the problem, to validate the experience and do it for yourself. You're feeling this way right now. You have every right to feel this way, like you would for a kid. You feel this way. You have every right to feel that way right now. And to validate your experience, because a lot of times what happens when we try and focus on fixing, might be with the best intentions. Like, why don't you just do this? And in the head, what's the person answering? Yeah, well, won't you think if I could, I would? Well, I'm powerless. They go back into the belief system that they're powerless. So it's easy for you to say, I can't do that, right? So don't try and fix. Validate the experience and just be there with love. And that might be holding your heart and breathing into it. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah, the breathing is really fantastic for if you're feeling an anxiety attack or feeling in a really anxious state. Definitely. I use this really great color visualization if I'm ever feeling anxious, and I teach it to all my clients as well, where you assign a color to the anxiety that you're feeling, wherever it is in the chest or the stomach, wherever you feel it, and then you envisage a calming color surrounding you, and you breathe in the calming color and you breathe out anxiety color, and you visualize filling your body with the calming color, and it really can change your state in a few moments. It's really powerful.
That reminds me, it's something you can do with actually with any feeling, but definitely with anxiety or depression, is localize in the body. Where in the body do you feel it? What color it is? What does it feel like? Is it heavy? Is it light? Is it big? Is it small? What's its texture? Is it far? Is it close? And just start paying attention to it, and then be like, okay, I wonder if I can stretch it. Can I turn it into red? Can I turn it into blue? Can I make it bigger? Can I make it smaller? Can I soften it? Can I make it liquid? And just the experience of playing with that takes its energy away, showing that you're in control of it and it's not in control of you.
Yeah, I agree with that totally. It took me, I think, in order for me to get rid of my anxiety and be by myself, I had to do yoga and meditate. And the movement allowed me to kind of escape and focus. And it was the focus on me, and which was absolutely lovely. And I recommend that to anybody.
Yeah, it gives me.
Be able to be with you at that moment in time, just to focus on each movement, the breath work. And with everything going on at the moment, breath work is so important. Like, it will help with the blood flow in your body and your respiratory system and your circulatory system. It's just absolutely phenomenal what breath work can actually do. I forgot something, but carry on, Caroline.
No, I was just nodding along and going, yeah, breathe, breath work. I think a lot of people don't breathe into like even half the capacity of their lungs and never do. So it's kind of, it sounds obvious, like, oh, everyone just knows how to breathe, but actually when you start focusing in and tuning in on how it affects how you feel when you focus on your breathing, then it opens up a whole new world, I think. In the yoga, I've really, since the whole lockdown has been in place, I've really got into doing loads of yoga, and it's been amazing. It's really helped me cope with it. I think it's probably been the biggest thing that I've added that's helped me kind of just keep on an even keel with what's going on. And that's the only additional thing that I've started doing regularly. I used to do it a couple of times a week, but now I'm doing it every single day, and it's made a big difference. So it gives you that connection and that quiet time, but as you said, being able to move your body as well. I think some people do struggle to just sit still with themselves, and it is hard. So having that movement incorporated with it, and it also moves the energy around the body as well. So if you've got any blockages and things, then it really helps kind of start the day really well. I think if you can do it in the morning, it's the best start to the day.
Some people actually don't realise that they do actually stop breathing. You hold the breath. I know when I go to the gym and I'm doing some weights or doing a circuit, and I just hold my breath, not realising I'm holding my breath, and they're like, breathe. But I am breathing, but you're actually not breathing. But my advice to people that do suffer from anxieties is just admit that it is an anxiety. This is the issue, and allow yourself to get support. And when I went through my depression, I was like, no, I can cope with it, I can deal with it, I can do it. And it just made it a lot worse, because I'm adding that extra pressure. I was adding that extra pressure on me to solve another issue. But it's okay. I just wanted to say, it's okay to ask for help. Help is out there, and no one will judge you. And if they do, then they're not the right people that are in your circle that are meant to be there to support you. And that is my main advice for getting help.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, definitely. Always reach out and just tell someone, even if you're not necessarily asking for help, just speak to someone about how you're feeling and see what happens. You know, it's just that telling that first person, like, I'm struggling. That's the hardest part almost, and it then becomes easier to then that acceptance essentially is the most important part, as you said so eloquently. It's that there are no bad emotions, there are no bad feelings. You just have to try not to fight against them, just allow them to come up, and almost you can say, oh, hi anxiety, you're back, and just acknowledge it, and it just takes all the wind out of it. You're not the passive receiver of the anxiety, you are noticing it, and it just gives you that little bit of control. That's first step. So important.
Yeah, it is important to communicate how we feel, and bottom line, it is our personal responsibility, but I also know that it can be very difficult for people to do that in the moment. And I think another thing that can be beneficial is for all of us as a people, as a society, to destigmatize mental health, to destigmatize depression or anxiety, to feel more comfortable with holding space for others as they're going through things. So it's maybe changing our very casual, hey, how are you doing type of thing, to like, how are you feeling? What are you feeling right now? And to just be in a place where we're comfortable to regularly talk about our emotions with others. That will open up and make it easier for people who have trouble with that to feel more comfortable to do that as well. It's a shift that we can do as a society altogether.
Wow, you know, I think I could talk about this for hours, absolutely hours. But we're going to leave it there. And I want to thank you, Yossef and Caroline, for joining me and sharing this beautiful experience and their professionalism on all sides of the story. And join us next week, where we're going to be talking about bereavement. Oh my goodness, it's a massive topic as well. So yeah, join in and subscribe. If you would like to visit Yossef or Caroline, we've got their details onto our website. So if you visit us on treeoflife.uk.com.
And we put it on the video at the bottom.
Okay. Thank you. Or you can always contact us on our Facebook page. So stay tuned and we'll see you soon. Take care, be safe, and stay at home. Thank you.
Thank
Goodbye.
you.
Bye.
Bye.
Oh. All right. Oh, I forgot to press stop. 1 second.
Oh.
You stopped the